Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, today we are unpacking what has got to be one of the most impossible economic miracles in modern human history. We're looking at the story of a tiny, seemingly insignificant island with absolutely zero natural resources that somehow, against all odds, transformed into a global economic powerhouse. It is a true phoenix rising from the ashes story. And honestly, the strategies they used to get there are absolutely fascinating. It's really a masterclass in survival for any struggling organization or nation today.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Just think about this for a second. Today, 1 out of every 6 people living in Singapore is a millionaire. Literally 1 in 6. It's a staggering statistic that perfectly captures the sheer scale of modern Singapore's wealth. But, it wasn't always shiny skyscrapers and massive bank accounts.
To truly appreciate where they are today, we have to look at exactly where they started. Back in 1847, Singapore was rough. It was a crime-ridden, poverty-stricken island. Out of a tiny population of just 70,000 people, 15,000 people were addicted to opium. It was essentially an unregulated den of vice. Contrast that with modern Singapore, boasting a GDP per capita of over $122,000, ranking second in the entire world, alongside world-class safety and infrastructure. Understanding this wild transformation is absolutely essential for anyone interested in how a nation can be built from scratch.
So how exactly did they do it? Well, here is our roadmap for the explainer. 1. The impossible economic miracle. 2. Geography and colonial trade. 3. Independence by force. 4. Unifying a divided nation. 5. The high-tech financial pivot. And finally, 6. The price of paradise.
All right, Section 1, the impossible economic miracle. Let's kick things off by looking at just how geographically disadvantaged this place actually was.
So, Singapore is a city-state. That means the city is the entire country, and it is tiny. We're talking over 4,500 times smaller than India. Yet it's packed with this incredibly dense population of over 7,000 people per square kilometer compared to India's 430. It has no domestic agriculture, no oil, no minerals. Geographically speaking, it had absolutely no right to become rich.
But they did have one massive, game-changing advantage: Section 2, geography and colonial trade.
Because, as they say, location is literally everything. Singapore sits right next to the Malacca and Sunda Straits. Now, a strait is just a narrow waterway connecting 2 larger bodies of water, and these specific straits linked the Indian Ocean directly to the South China Sea. This brilliantly illustrates how whoever controlled Singapore had a virtual monopoly on trade between East and West Asia, dating all the way back to the 7th century.
Fast forward to 1819. The British East India Company spotted this absolute gold mine and bought the island from the Sultan of Johor for, get this, a mere 8,000 Spanish dollars. Talk about a bargain. To crush their Dutch competitors, the British instituted a brilliant strategy. They made Singapore a free port with 0 taxes, and it worked perfectly, drawing ships from all over the world. But this unregulated boom brought a massive influx of transient labor, extreme poverty, and that devastating Chinese opium epidemic we talked about earlier, planted directly by British trading interests.
Now, this chaotic foundation eventually led to one of the darkest eras in their history: Section 3, independence by force.
The mid-20th century was just brutal for Singapore. First, you have a devastating and bloody Japanese invasion and occupation in 1942. After the war, the British came back but slowly started granting self-governance. Then in 1959, a visionary leader named Lee Kuan Yew, or LKY, takes charge as prime minister. Seeking security in a larger market, LKI actually successfully merged Singapore into Malaysia in 1963. But following deadly racial riots between Malay and Chinese communities, Malaysia made a shocking geopolitical move. They kicked Singapore out in 1965.
August 9th, 1965. This date carries so much emotional weight. Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew literally wept on national television when he announced the independence of his nation. Think about that. Singapore is widely considered the world's only country forced into independence. They were completely alone, deeply divided by race, and shortly facing the massive economic blow of the British military pulling out completely. They had to survive or fade away.
Which brings us to Section 4, unifying a divided nation. LKI knew that before he could even think about fixing the economy, he had to unite this deeply fractured population.
And the reality on the ground back then, it was grim. 70% of the population lived in extreme poverty, squalor, basically, slums. And worse, these slums were totally segregated by race. The Chinese, Malays, and Indians all lived in their own isolated bubbles. LKI knew that without national unity, absolutely any economic policy he tried to roll out would completely fail.
Now, what's really fascinating here is how deliberate, almost mechanical, his solution was. He didn't just cross his fingers and hope for unity. He engineered it. He created the Housing and Development Board, moving people out of slums and into government-subsidized high-rises. And crucially, he mandated racial quotas in these buildings, literally forcing different communities to live right next door to each other. He also heavily invested in high-quality government schools to replace segregated community ones, ensuring equal opportunity, and made multilingual cultural events mandatory. He even created a brand new unified flag and national anthem to forge a shared identity from scratch.
But here's the thing, unity alone wasn't going to cut it. The system had to be clean. LKY knew his whole nation-building plan would totally collapse if the government was corrupt, so he passed the 1960 Prevention of Corruption Act and set up an independent bureau reporting directly to him. The penalties were, and actually still are, severe, a staggering $100,000 fine and 5 to 7 years in jail. He instituted a ruthless zero-tolerance policy across both the public and private sectors. And you know what? That imparted immense global trust in this new nation. So, with a unified, disciplined, and corruption-free foundation, they were finally ready to make some money. Section 5. The High-Tech Financial Pivot.
Let's move to and see how this builds, because their path to wealth was essentially a three-step masterstroke. Step 1 was just basic survival. With zero domestic industry, LKY offered massive tax holidays to lure foreign manufacturing. Over 250 foreign companies flocked there in just 2 years. Step 2, leveling up. LKY realized basic labor wasn't enough, so he offered 5 years zero tax incentives for high-tech industries like electronics and pharma, creating joint training centers to upskill his citizens. And finally, Step 3, global finance. By completely abolishing a massive 45% government tax on bank interest, foreign banks absolutely flooded in. By 1983, this tiny island was the world's largest exporter of hard disk drives. No way, right?
And the results? Absolutely explosive. By 1970, Singapore hit a massive GDP growth rate of 13.94%. Within just a few short years of independence, they literally achieved zero unemployment. In fact, they created so many jobs, they actually had to start importing labor just to keep up with the demand.
Today, it's a gleaming metropolis, but it definitely comes at a cost. Section 6, the price of paradise. You see, the cleanest, safest, and most efficient city on Earth maintains that paradise through uncompromising, incredibly strict order. Honestly, some of these facts are kind of mind-blowing. You will face heavy fines for not flushing a public toilet, yes, really, or for littering and jaywalking. It's famously illegal to sell or import chewing gum. You can face jail time just for connecting to someone else's unsecured Wi-Fi. And they maintain an absolutely ruthless zero-tolerance policy on drugs. The harmony and pristine condition of Singapore is maintained by a very, very heavy hand of the law. Which leaves us with this final, provocative thought. As other nations around the world struggle with division and economic stagnation, they often look to Singapore. But what do you think? Is their model of extreme, forced unity and intense, strict discipline the ultimate blueprint for global success that anyone can copy? Or is it a unique exception, a product of a tiny island forced into a corner, willing to pay the ultimate price of absolute strictness for a perfect paradise? Let that sink in. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope it gave you a crystal clear picture of how Singapore got crazy rich.